Hello and welcome back to Tom's Datsun Garage. Well, I'm going to start cruising right along with the rear suspension. I've got everything laid out here that I'm going to need to install it, including the hardware and the tools. And I'm going to go over all of that with you by bringing you in for a closer look, going over everything, and then get under the car and start putting it in. And then off camera, in the background, I'm going to be dealing with Techno Toy Tuning about the front cross member and trying to figure out how to get a replacement one because my steering rack won't bolt to the one I got from them, as you saw in the last video. It's Christmas week, so they may have been closed. I haven't heard from them. I did send them an email out Monday. It is now Saturday, and it's been complete radio silence, so it's very possible they've been closed all week. But I'll reach out to them again Monday via phone sometime when they're open, I guess. They're 4 hours behind us, so I'll work that out and try to get a hold of a replacement so that I can keep cruising along on the front end, because we are so close to having that finished. I don't see anything here where it looks like I'm going to have any type of fitment issues, so it's time to go over everything and get started. Alright, here we are. Here's all the parts laid out and the tools you're going to need. So let's start with these. These are the rear uprights, also called drop mounts, and your lower control arms are going to bolt into here, the back part of your lower control arms. The front ones are going to be held into place by that, which is also doubles as your front mount for your differential. But I'm not going to be putting the differential mount in on the front because I don't have the differential ready to go in yet, and that's going to be towards the end anyway. We're also going to, well, I made a bit of a decision too. So one of the things I decided was I ordered the stainless steel Techno Toy Tuning end cap bolts for that hold the rear bushings in place, but I decided to go with the original OEM ones. This is one of the few situations where I'm able to use or reuse original hardware to the car despite having modified suspension parts. For the most part, everything's design is different enough where I'm not able to do that. And that'll even include these because they supply the hardware to install the uprights, and because of the way they're designed, using the original hardware might not even be possible anyway. So let's get started by putting in the drop mounts first, and then we'll move on to the Mustache bar. These are held into the car by these Allen-headed or Allen key style bolts. This kit comes with 3 different length bolts: shorter ones with lock washers, mid-length ones with lock washers, and longer ones with lock washers. The longest ones are the ones that actually go through here and hold it to the body of the car. These mid-length ones are going to be for the caps on the bottom that clamp around the lower control arm bushings, and the top ones are for the dog bone brace that goes between both of these and braces them together. If you have a rear sway bar, these will probably not be used because the sway bar fancy caps that I got come with extended length ones. So if you have just the dog bone itself without the rear sway bar setup, then you'll be using these. So that'll be the difference when we go to put them in. But now that I've got these and the long ones ready to go, The Allen head is a 5/16. It's not metric, it's actually SAE. Let's get these in the car. The holes we're going to be using are right here. These are where the drop mounts are going to be mounted to, and the bolts are going to be on this side. So the open part of those new drop mounts are going to be facing the front of the car, and the hardware is going to go up through here into these bolts. We'll get to these holes when we go to do the Mustache bar. So let's get the drop mounts in. All right, we're going to start here with, this is the passenger side, like that. You can see how it's got the opening here for you to put your hardware through. And for that, I'm using a extension for the 5/16 to go on, because it gets around these awkward angles here. And I always, well, not always, but a lot of the times I like to put just a dab of grease on the threads. This sometimes can be controversial, but it served me well over the years. I'm gonna put that through there. Get this started. Okay. You don't need to go crazy with the grease, but just a dab will do just fine. I switched over to what's called a wobble socket. It's got a slightly different head on it. It's more rounded, and that helps with getting in angles like this. So it's easier for me to run it in by hand instead of struggling with it. Yeah, that worked a treat. So the two holes here on this side had some probably paint buildup in the threads. What I should have done was run a thread chaser or a tap through here just to clean the threads up before I put the drop mount on this side. This isn't fully tightened down. This is loose enough to move around just in case I need to adjust something. But so I had to run the bolts down through just to clean the threads up, and that seemed to work very good. Now it's time to put this side on. Okay, so both of these have just a little bit of wiggle room. These are not torqued down all the way. And Techno Toy Tuning does have a engraving in here that tells you the tightness or the torque spec. They're saying 50 foot-pounds. It's engraved in here. It also has the directions on which everything is facing and which side is right and left, just like the front suspension pieces. So that's very nice. I like to see that kind of engineering and things. Considering that none of this comes with any kind of instructions. So it's mostly self-explanatory, especially if you're taking apart a car that's already together. But if you're starting from scratch like I am, and it's been a few years, and you gotta refer to photos and a little bit of help from them to get everything on the right side. All right, so now that we've got these in place, I'm gonna go ahead and get the Mustache bar put in, which is gonna be dropped in through the top. Next up, we're going to be doing the rear differential mount, also called the Mustache bar, because the original piece kind of resembles a mustache, I guess. So this is a multi-piece ordeal from Techno Toy Tuning. It is aluminum. It's real nice, just like a lot of their other parts. It's got pretty much solid bushings. These are like almost like Delrin, pretty much. Very hard material, so this will transmit a lot of NVH through to the car. So that's just something to keep in mind if you decide to go this route. Also, the cap screws that it comes with are really nice. They're stainless cap screws. Their washers are steel, and I had them plated to look OEM. and I'm just going to leave the stainless stuff that it came with alone. These are multi-piece bushings, so they just fit right into these. They just press right into place real nice like that. And then this sleeve will go down through the center. These aren't going to move a whole lot when the differential's twisting around under load, the acceleration, deceleration. But I am going to put a little bit of bushing grease on here anyway. I do have some, and I'm going to be using that just in case, just to make sure they stay quiet. It's very sticky, gooey, like a silicone paste, but I'm gonna put it in there anyway. And then these two flat washers will sandwich either side of these bushings, and everything will bolt up to these here. These bolts screw down into the body of the car in those holes I showed you earlier, and they get screwed in from the top. And this is a 24mm head. And then it has a flat washer underneath, and then it has these pieces, and then it's all capped off by a flat washer and a lock nut. So some of the original hardware to the car does get to be reused for this purpose. That always makes me happy. So, all right, enough yapping. Let's get it all assembled and put it in the car. Okay, here inside the car is the top of that hole I showed you earlier, and we're gonna put this in with a dab of grease on the threads, put the lock washer on, or the flat washer on there, drop it down into place, and then we're gonna screw this in with a 24mm socket. Okay, now to go underneath the car. They do come with, these bushings come with a couple of these little tubes of, they call it Prothane super grease, but it's basically like a very thick viscous silicone type paste, and this is what keeps these style urethane style bushings quiet. I have a giant container of it here. Well, it's not giant, but it's a really good sized container. It's about the size of my hand. So I'm not worried about running out of it. If you are, or you have to re-lube yours frequently because you track your car or something like that, then it would be worth buying one of these tubs. I got mine off of Amazon, I believe. So I'm gonna forego their little tubes, just use my big tub that I use for my Miata's rear sway bar and front sway bar bushings, because I have upgraded sway bars on my Miata. And get these with a very thin coat, and then assemble them, and then I'll put a very thin coat on the inside and then slide this through. It may not be super necessary on this particular mount because it doesn't have near the movement that, say, your rear lower control arms would, and you can see the little grooves in the rear lower control arms. That is to hold the lubricant. Those little grooves etched into that. I don't know if you can see that on camera, but that's their purpose, is to hold extra lubricant. And these may need to be taken apart from time to time and re-lubricated, and that's fine. The trade-off is worth it. It's not like you're gonna have to be doing it super often, but I'm gonna put lube on here anyway, just because I'm here and I'm doing it. So just as extra added assurance that I don't get any squeaks, just in case. But typically you'll do it in high movement areas like your sway bar mounts and your lower control arm bushings. All right, enough of that digression. I also am gonna be putting a dab of grease on these bolts that go through and hold the Mustache bar to the mount, because one, it's stainless steel going into aluminum, and you don't want any corrosion in there. And I could use anti-seize as well, but a dab of grease should work just as well. In this application, I'm not really living up north or anything like that, whereas this car is going to be seeing any type of snow or anything like that. So, All right, let's get this assembled. All right, you can see these have been installed and they're ready for the first washer. So these washers have two different size holes. There's a larger hole and a smaller hole. The larger one goes up to the fatter part of the bolt that sticks down through the body. So that's going to be first. We're going to follow that up with the actual mount, then that washer, then that washer, and the 17mm lock nut. Also, I want to make sure that the holes are facing towards the back of the car, like so. Like that. And then I'll run this down almost tight. And then we'll bolt the bar on to the back of it here. And it's going to be a real tight fit right through here. Okay. Rear diff mount / mustache bar is in and tight. These are still a little bit on the loose side, and we'll get to that dog bone brace that goes between these two pieces here in just a little bit. But now let's move on to the next thing, which is going to be, let's get the lower control arms assembled and ready to go in. As covered earlier, we're going to use a little bit of grease, the silicone paste in between these bushings and the car, and these metal sleeves. And these metal sleeves will slide right over the control arm like that, followed by this washer, followed by the lock washer, and then it gets held into place with these. And that's going to be at all 4 inside ends here. And you really should leave it loose where the bushing can slide out just a little bit. So don't run this all the way home just yet. So the bushing can slide out just a little bit, because you're going to need these pieces of the bushings to straddle the mounts. The drop mounts will come down here, and then the caps will go underneath and screw these to them. But you want to make sure that these pieces are hugging it. And if you go to town or try to run this home too tight, then you may not have enough room to spread that out. So once they're in the car, then we'll go ahead and get these tightened up the rest of the way. But that's going to make the installation a little easier doing it that way. So these rear ones, the ones that go towards the rear of the car, are shorter than the front ones. And the front ones are just a little bit longer. The sleeves and the bushings themselves are a little longer. And here's what I was talking about. You leave a little bit of a gap so that it can hug what bolts it up to the car. Because if I just ran it home and just close this gap, it's not going to want to sit in there very good. So we'll tighten those up once they're in the car, but we'll have that little bit of gap. But now it's basically rinse and repeat of putting the very sticky silicone paste on everything and getting these to the point where they're ready to bolt up into the car. And I will actually be checking the threads in the bottom of the car, that the bolts that hold the mounts to the body, like the front diff mount holes, those are going to be checked and have a tap ran through them first, so I don't run into any problems with that. it's time now to offer up the lower control arms into place. And I went ahead and ran a tap through those front mounting holes. Now that's a 10 by 125 tap that I ran through there with a little bit of grease so that I know the bolts will go through there without any problem. And to be fair, whenever you have a car come out of a body shop and you're trying to put parts back on it, it's a good idea to chase the threads anyway, because there could be paint built up inside the threads, and that's what's going to cause it to be difficult. Now, one of the other things I figured I would do while I'm at this point is I'm going to take this dog bone brace and I'm going to bolt it into place to get these pieces located. I'm going to leave it kind of loose like it is and put this all together with the bolts that were supplied so that I could get everything locked into place here. What that's going to do is ensure that when I tighten the ones that mount up into the body with the lower control arms in place, everything will be located, and when I take the bolts off to put the sway bar mounts on, I don't have to fight with the sway bar mount bolts. They'll just go, they should theoretically go right in because everything will be lined up and locked down at that point. So now it's just time to put you guys on a stand and get it all bolted in. So in case you didn't catch the order that I did things in, I got these started at the corners here just so I could get everything kind of just lined up. And a smarter person probably would have used a floor jack. I put the lower control arms in. I used the rear mounts first to hold everything in place. I got those down, not quite all the way tight. Then I put the front mount up into place, and in particular, make sure that you have that notch on the driver's side because that's where your exhaust comes through. And then the differential mount will go up here at some point. But after I got those installed, make sure that these bolts are loose so that your mount can slide apart a little bit. That'll help get everything lined up. It would have been a little easier if I'd have done that first, but I eventually figured it out. And then once I got everything in place, that's when I started tightening everything down. So I got these tightened down, I got these all locked down, all of those. And then I went, after that was all locked down, I went and finished tightening up the drop mount bolts. And then finally I went and got these tightened up. And now you can see the bushings are well lubed with that silicone paste, and the bushings are in place on either side of their mounts, and everything's tight. So it is tight to move this arm. It's pretty tight to move, maybe too tight. I may have to look into that, but everything's brand new and fresh, so there's pretty much like no deflection in them. So they're going to not move under hard acceleration and G-forces and so forth. Next up, I'm going to put in these pieces that go across here, and those are the optional braces for extra strength to help box in this control arm section here. Just kind of ties everything together, and these ribs have to go on top of each other, and they help make everything extra sturdy. And it also came with its own stainless hardware, so I'll get those in next. The optional power braces are marked right and left and which side faces the rear of the car. And these teeth are going to, or serrations or teeth, are going to mesh together. It came with the stainless hardware over here. Those are 6mm hex head, Allen head bolts that hold the power braces on. And now it's time to get them up and bolt them into place. Starting with the dog bone taken back off, hopefully everything will line right back up with those holes because everything was locked down into place before removing it. So hopefully nothing got shifted around where it should be able to, I should be able to get these bolts here through the rear sway bar mount brackets right into those holes. I've already got the bushings themselves heavily greased with that silicone paste, and I've got a dab of grease on the bolts themselves, and these bolts are the 5/16 socket, the Allen head socket. So time to get this thing mounted up there, and then after that we won't put the sway bar end links on just yet that connect the sway bar to the lower control arms, because before I do that, it's finally time to put the strut assemblies in, the coilover strut assemblies. So let's get moving. Right on. I was judicious with the use, but you're supposed to be. So now the rear sway bar is attached and in place and tightened down. We'll do the end links in a little bit. That'll be last. But now it's finally time for the coilover assemblies to be put in. So let's go back up top to the 3 holes. Just like the front, these 3 holes are going to go through a series of holes in the body, up through the top, into the hatch area, where 3 14mm nuts and lock washers will retain the strut housing assemblies and strut mounts right up here. And then underneath, we'll worry about bolting that to the lower control arms after we get them both hanging in here. All right, both of them are now hanging from their mounts. 14mm. I did not tighten these yet. I have these just hand tight, just to hold the strut into place. And if you come down here, it's starting to look like more like a complete suspension. But what we need to do next is we need to get the what's called the spindle pin through here. And this is the one supplied with the Techno Toy Tuning kit. So that is actually a 1/4-inch ratchet square head right there to help twist it in, I guess. And the nut on the end of it is a 24mm. I'll go back here. But you'll also get this seemingly random pile of washers with the suspension. And there's really no explanation as to what these are. I call them adjustment washers. And how this works is you actually you fill these gaps in here between the front and rear ears of your control arms to fill in those gaps. But you can also set where you want your hub, more forward or more backwards towards the back of the car, depending on how many shims you put here or here. And you can add a shim and subtract a shim and then add it to the back and so forth. But you want these to be spaced to where there's no space in there between the ends and the surface here on the bottom of your spindle. So that's the goal. You want enough washers in between both to where you can tighten that spindle pin all the way and it doesn't try to bend these inwards. And on my 1973 240Z, that car had lowering springs on it, and that was about it, suspension-wise. That was different from stock. And I always remember it seemed like the rear tire sat forward more in the wheel well because of that. That was it didn't drive me nuts, but I didn't care for it. So it just kind of looked a little off. This car is probably not going to be that low, and this setup can help offset that. So if the car is really low for some reason, and the front and this thing starts to creep more to the front because it's so low, I can adjust those washers to get this more back centered in the wheel well opening. And that may also help with drive shaft alignment as well for the CV shafts that's going in here. So I'm going to go ahead and figure out exactly how many I need to stack in here, and then I will get these on both sides set and bolted up with the spindle pins. Okay, here's where I ended up. So I've got one of the larger flat washers here on the outside and another one on the inside to squish that boot together, because that optional rubber boot takes up some space. But with the larger of the flat washers on each side, I figured that would be the best bet. I've got 5 of the slightly smaller outside diameter washers stacked in here. I have another large one here, another large one on the outside in the back, and my lock nut. And this design doesn't use the original pieces that lock down your spindle pin, so you can omit that, I guess. I'll double check with Techno Toy Tuning, but there was no groove cut into their bolt to accept that little wedge piece that would normally go in here and lock that pin from spindle pin from spinning inside here. But you can lock this down to a point, and just remember that the lock nut has it. It's not going anywhere. So you can lock it down to a point, but you also want it to pivot so that the suspension can move up and down freely and it just won't be loose. So now I'm going to go ahead to the passenger side and I'll match the same exact amount of shims. And I did this to set it back a little bit further so that it'll help center the wheel and the wheel well, because the car will be slightly lower than factory. So now to go to the other side and make that happen, and then we'll put in the we'll finally get to put in the sway bar end links, and we'll finally be done for the time being. And here's the passenger side done. Same amount of washers stacked in down here. Still have the larger flat washer there, the larger one on the other side of this boot, and then the 5 smaller ones. A larger one, and the lock nut. So that is all together. And it is a little bit necessary to trim off the very lips of those boots so that the flat washers can sit against here far enough to get that nut started. That's not going to really affect this performance too much. As you can see, it's already completely enclosed anyway with the washer pushing against it. So it was just a little protrusions on those, just a little lips I'd cut off with a razor knife on both of the driver's side and the passenger side on the back one. On the front one, it wasn't really necessary. I was able to get it fished through, no problem. So they're still in there, the lips are. They're just being pushed together by the washers. So no compromise there. That wound up working out great. And now it's time to finish everything off with the installation of the sway bar end links. The sway bar end links are pretty straightforward. Basically, it's a 14mm nut, another 14mm nut, and the 5/16 Allen key head for the top. These rear sway bar end links are adjustable in height, which we're not going to do that today. That basically lets you set the preload so you can actually have a little bit of tension on one side more than the other when going through corners if you wish. We're not going to worry about that today. We're going to make everything even. We'll get into the regular adjustments of these once it's time to set up the suspension, but that's going to be way down the road. But in the meantime, we can at least get them installed. So we're going to use that hole there to get that through, and these bushings are going to sandwich around this part of the lower control arm, and then this top bolt will go through one of these holes here. This allows you to set how tight you want the sway bar to be. So the further away from where the sway bar mounts means that you'll have more leverage to twist the bar. It'll be easier to get more sway out of it. If you go further in, it'll make the rear end tighter, or it will sway less in turns. Again, this is going to be set up on a permanent basis once the car is driving. That's way down the road. So for the purpose of today's video, I'm just going to select it on the loosest setting. This car did not come with a rear sway bar from the factory, so this on its lowest setting would still be a massive improvement. So, and it might even be overkill for what I'm doing, but I'm doing it anyway. So let's get them installed. All right, there's a little gap here that's going to draw this closer. The sway bar isn't perfectly centered. It's real close, but it's not perfectly centered, so it may shift further back this way to close that gap up. I'm going to get the other side started, and I got the lock nut on to where the threaded portion is just barely sticking past the portion of the bottom. And that way, it's fully engaged with the lock nut, and I can adjust these later on. So here's the driver's side one installed, and you can see how I have just a couple of threads past that nut. That's what you want for maximum adjustment up here, because that's just a stud that goes down through there that's adjustable. And of course I have to center this by loosening its bolts, the mounting bolts, and then sliding it over and back and measuring to get it perfectly centered before I lock these down, which I'll do that at a later date. So that's the whole suspension pretty much installed. Okay. I've got one last thing I want to do before I sign off. Oh yeah. Just wanted to see what that was going to look like. Yeah. Good thing I had those fender lips rolled at the body shop before the car was painted. That's the ticket right there. Nice. Well, the back half of the car is now a roller. Well, that's going to conclude this video. The rear suspension is installed, and I hope that I was able to help somebody out there with the technical aspects of installing the suspension. I will be going over on how to adjust it and set it up, but that's going to be way down the road when the car is ready to actually get an alignment done on it. But this will get the car enough to be a roller, and you notice there's no brakes on it yet because the brake kit that I want is not available yet. So to be determined on that. But the car looks pretty darn good, and I made some pretty good progress today, so I'm very happy with today's outcome. I still need to, of course, work out what's going on with the front cross member, and then this car can be a roller all the way around, and then I can really start cranking on the getting the doors back together and working on the inside of the car once it's back on its own 4 tires. So until that happens, I don't know when my next video will be out. But I appreciate every single one of you for watching. And I'm pretty sure you've learned at least something. At least what to do and probably what not to do, and what would help and what wouldn't help. That's all I got for you guys. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next video.